You guys have heard a lot from people today, and you've heard a lot of stories. And one person's story is homage for all of us. These stories, whether they're visual, audible, or verbal, offer us hope, knowledge, and empowerment. In my experience as an educator, artist, and activist, I full-heartedly believe in this. L'Oreal said, "My people will sleep for 100 years, but when they awake, it will be the artists who will give them their spirit back." Through simple means of expression, lines, color, shape, dance moves, or musical notes, people can apply personal meaning and symbolism to communicate something that you don't need language to understand. Indigenous people are wanting to tell their story through their voice, and art has the power to amplify their voice to tell a different story and perspective. To show that we have a common humanity is that binds us all together. This is the most important use of art, to amplify voice, spark conversation, bring hope and joy to those who need it the most. So I'm going to tell you a story. So this story is about a little boy. He grew up in a family of a mom and dad and a sister, a nuclear family. He was supposed to be looked at as a white person. But he was inquisitive. He liked listening to adults, and he heard that he was a Métis person. He didn't know what Métis meant, and so he asked his parents. And his parents said, "Don't worry about that." So then he said, "Okay, well, you know what? I'm going to go ask my teacher." And his teacher said, "Oh, no, don't worry about that." So again, being inquisitive, he went to, this was the older times, he went to the encyclopedias. There was no Google or Wikipedia. He went and looked, and he found what Métis was. And he was proud of that. And so he was in the gym locker room one day, and at the time he heard a lot of racial slurs towards Indigenous people. Didn't really understand why people said these things because that's who he was. And so he was in the gym locker room, and this is at the time when the Starlight Tours are happening in Saskatchewan. And so for some of you who don't know what that is, it's what would happen is police would take Indigenous people out to the Queen Elizabeth Power Factory and make them walk back. That was their punishment. And a lot of people died. So he's in the locker room, and some of these kids were making fun of these people who had to walk back. So this little boy said, "You know what? You shouldn't be saying those things because those things are mean, and I am a Métis person." And what the boy said back was, "How about you go take a walk then?" So this boy didn't know who he was, didn't know his identity, and at the age of 14, he attempted suicide. And for reasons he doesn't know, that he couldn't really comprehend, he stopped mid-attempt, and he's thankful because he's standing in front of you today. That little boy was me. No child should ever be told they are broken, less than, or not worthy of life. And that's what happened to me. And that's why I became a teacher. I became a teacher is because I need to be there for my students, my Indigenous students. A lot of them don't understand who they are and hear all these different stereotypes about them, and they're lost. So I use art to help them with their journey, because art was my rock, my salvation, and helped me through this damp, dingy tunnel that I lived in. So my sketchbooks became my safe place. My canvas became an open channel to my spirit, a lens into what can be sensed but not seen. And this is why I pursued what I'm doing today. So I went to university, I got a teaching degree. Then I did a master's in public health because I saw that health and education are very similar and don't really talk to each other very often. I do believe they should be talking to each other because there's lots of things that are very similar. And then I decided, well, I did MPH because my mom wanted me to be a doctor. So I'm like, there's your health degree. Here you go. Threw in her face. I'm going back to my first love, which was art. So then I decided to do a PhD in social justice art education. And that's where I am today. So I'm going to do a little experiment with you. So when you look at the screen up there, what do you guys see? Instantly, instinct. What do you see? Circles. What else do you see? Colors. What else? 3D glasses. That's a new one. I haven't heard that one yet. That's good. But would you say that they're equal in size? Yeah? But they're not. One is actually bigger than the other. So we're going to do a little poll. Who thinks the red one is bigger? Okay. Who thinks the blue one is bigger? Okay. So actually, they're actually the same. And the reason why I did that is because I just manipulated you like that into thinking something that's actually not true and went against your instinct. Just imagine as a child that you're told that blue circle is bigger than the red. If you say that enough times, if you tell that enough times, you convince yourself that it's true. If you're told a lie enough times, it becomes part of your reality. And if enough people are taught that lie, it becomes part of your culture. And if that culture passes that misinformation along the next generation, it then becomes a tradition, such as residential schools. So when a story is told enough times to enough people, it becomes part of that culture and then a tradition. And this story is being told every day, in fact. So when we look at Canada, we just had the Olympics. What were they saying about Canada? What are some adjectives that they always say about Canada? Sorry? Peaceful, yeah. What's another one? Friendly. Equality. Free. Yes, awesome. Harmonious, liberal ideas, democracy. These ideas are probably familiar to you, and you would recognize this as part of Canada's identity. This is my reality and the reality of my Indigenous students. Homelessness, suicide, racism, cultural genocide. Tanya talked about 7's a very strong number within her life. It's also a very strong number in my life. I've worked for 7 years as a teacher. I've lost 7 students. Some graduated and then passed away, but I've lost 7 students. I have a student that comes into my room lots, and he was on the phone talking to NA, and he was normal, but it sounded like it was a very concerning conversation. And I said, "Oh, what's wrong?" He said, "Oh, I was just talking to my mom," and he's from the north. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, what was wrong?" He's like, "Oh, we just found my cousin in the ditch dead." And I'm like, "Oh, do you want to talk about that?" Nope. It's become normalized that people are dying. It blew my mind that he just didn't care. He's like, "Oh, that just happens in the north." People can't have drinking water. The ladies up top there, the one, it would be my second to the right, left, the middle one up there. That is my student's mom. Her parents died when she was 2 years old. Her mom died because a guy asked her to come over to his truck. She didn't want to. She got ran over. She has no mom. She has no dad when she was 3 years old. And the reason why I tell you these things is because sometimes we look at statistics and we just look at them as a number. We never associate them with a person who has loved, who has had compassion, who has been sad, and has felt all those feelings that you have felt. And that's why I tell you these stories. A lot of times when I'm in school, I hear teachers, a lot of the teachers in my school are middle-class white people We have 132 staff, and there's only 3 Indigenous people. And one thing they say a lot, which makes me so angry, is that they'll tell students, hey man, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, develop some grit. But when you're dealing with this stuff, you're not born with straps on your boots. So how are you supposed to pick yourself up? The issues that one reflects a particular part, these slides, reflect a particular view that is shaped by racism, race, and specific colonial contexts. The fact that more of us are familiar with the Canadian images and not familiar with the images speaks volumes at what the very hard racism within Canada. So, this is why I think we need reconciliation, but I don't call it reconciliation. I call it reconciliation. So my definition is to decolonize, to deconstruct with the hope of building something new, something stronger. It's moving away from colonization to a new place. As braiding a tight weave, it requires some tension resistance to receive what we were and remake ourselves. And a Cree elder told me one time, which I thought was beautiful, it's actually quite poetic, how she looks at reconciliation. She looks at it as weaving a braid of sweetgrass, where there's 2 people on each side, and they tug at it. And you need that certain tension, that certain resistance, so that you have this beautiful thing that is being made. But if there's too much tension on each side, it breaks. But if it's too loose, things fall through. And I thought that was a really beautiful way of putting where reconciliation is for her. There's another representation I use as well. There's a bridge, Victoria Bridge in Saskatoon. Some of you are from Saskatchewan, so you might know what this one is. It was torn down, and they rebuilt it. But I like to look at it as building a bridge. So reconciliation is in the middle. There's 2 people. There's a non-Indigenous on one side, Indigenous on the other. We need those calls for action to make ourselves get to the reconciliation place so we have a new future. So I talk a lot with my students about a lot of things because I think they need to know. And one conversation I like to I want to share with you, I'm just going to read it. So I would ask my students, why must artists make works of art about social issues and problems? And one boy says, to show a different way. So again, I say, well, what do you mean by that? Like, you can always talk about different problems and stuff, but you can express it in picture form. So I said, why would artists want to do that? And he said, because voices aren't heard. This conversation echoes loudly with me. What if we did listen to what our youth were teaching us about art and healing? What would we learn about how they approach making art to change the world? What if their voices were actually heard? I also ask 4 big questions to my students before they come into my room. And these are very big questions that I think you guys also should ask yourselves. Number 1, who am I? Number 2, where do I come from? Number 3, where am I going? And number 4, what are my responsibilities? 4 simple questions, but have huge impact. And the reason why I ask these 4 questions is because for us to affect the future, heal the past, or transform the relationship with others, we need to be concerned with our own transformation in the present time and change the way that we're personally living in this world. These questions make early connections to personal experiences and identities so we can situate and articulate the reasons for our art making, as well as laying the groundwork for additional inquiry into our own reconciliation or social issue. To teach for personal and social change also requires a way of engaging people's hearts and spirits. So I do heart learning in my room because children need 2 things. They need love and they need the arts. Love so they know that they're valued, and the arts so they can express that value. Like many of you, and what I'm doing exactly right now, is you were taught head up. Our schooling is emphasized by the importance of the mind, brain, and academic excellence. It never is influenced by what we are learning from the heart or what we are feeling. I have a kid who's an FI student, which we call a Saskatchewan or a special needs student. And if you were to take him out into the wilderness, he will tell you everything about every plant, every animal, why the water flows, everything that encompasses Indigenous knowledges. But since he can't write a full sentence, he's put into a special needs room. Our tests don't test our Indigenous knowledges. They test our Western knowledges. In the medicine wheel philosophy, the mind and the heart are connected. Indeed, the mind and the heart are not only connected, but the heart is the root of the mind. So they start to think with their hearts, not just their minds. Where they have an embodied experience where their hearts guide their creativity and give shape to the things in the universe so that they better understand their place in this world. And that's why I call it heart learning. Art also becomes, I always like to say art is like a mirror and it's like a window. It's like a mirror because it reflects back of who they are as a person, but it's also a window so they get to see into somebody else's life. Art becomes a mirror and a window. And art becomes a literacy of the heart. It also helps us make a platform for voice. And why I say it's a platform, because our kids have voices. We just don't hear them. We need to make a platform so that they can use that voice. So, from a student working with charcoal, saying that this is helping her understand why Indigenous people are the way they are, or laughing, or another kid who's laughing in the flurry of tissue paper, saying, I was really ready to give in to the man, but this newfound sense of hope is really screwing with the plan. Or lastly, a student playing with paint and with just brushing beautiful crimson red onto a canvas, saying, everybody thinks I'm so tough, but on the inside, I'm just cake. Several issues regarding identity, oppression, or freedom are difficult to talk about, and art can be an additional way to communicate these different issues. It creates accessibility and tells the stories of those who have often been unheard or those stories that have been erased. I find that power of art and storytelling has the ability to heal, to provoke, and to stimulate change within a person and a society. What is almost unspeakable, what cannot be contained, is all allowed to live through the form of art. So the one I want to talk about here is the lady with the hair. And this student, it's on the Missing Murdered Women. It's an Indigenous lady. She's crying. There's a maple leaf on her lips because Canada has silenced her. And each little braid of hair is somebody she knows who's passed away. Again, these are 14 and 18-year-old kids. So combining the visual, a safe means of interpreting inward thoughts, feelings that may not be so welcoming in other disciplines, I'm there listening unconditionally and using art to help my students find their voice or develop a platform to use their voice. If they are heard and seen, people will listen. So having students engage in reconciliation art gives them an opportunity to critically reflect and act, as well as start to develop a sense of agency and engage within the social world. It continues students to engage the world within its complexity and fullness in order to reveal the possibilities of new ways of constructing thought and action beyond how it currently exists. This lets the students develop the ability to ask questions about themselves, as well as questions about their current systems around them. They learn how to see how their own life experiences are part of a bigger social network, and their experiences assist in influencing the world around them. When students establish this view of the world, they know that they can alter and recreate a more fair society. They become an active agent of change and no longer an object of the world. Students start to develop an analytical lens and focus on transforming the reflections and actions of themselves so they can bring about social change within the social world around them. So I've done lots of things. I've done murals. That's my drumming group, those boys up there. They're pretty funny kids. I've actually, don't tell Broadway, I actually rewrote Peter Pan. I made it culturally appropriate. So I deleted all the racial language in there. I made Tegrally as a positive person. And we actually, when she was introduced, we did a massive round dance on our theater stage for her. And our powwow group actually played her music. So there's lots of things that I'm trying to do within our school system so that people can understand what Indigenous is. If you want ideas, come talk to me. I have a ton of ideas in this head. So I'm going to have a little conclusion here, and then we're going to get some art making, okay? So these various projects indicate that the arts and artistic practices may serve to shape public memory in ways that are potentially transformative for individuals, communities, and national history. They create art to build and rebuild, to learn and relearn, to recover and remember. Perhaps one of the unifying qualities is that we all have been and continue to be on a journey. A journey of self-discovery, a journey of growth, a journey of pain, a journey of understanding the world around us, and a journey understanding what it means to be Indigenous in this world. My journey is still ongoing within myself and with my students, and perhaps this presentation will help others on their own journeys. Let's help our Indigenous youth have new seas upon which to sail, rather than old ports at which to dock.